Hi, I'm Dr. Jake Patton, and I'm going to be your instructor for SHS 367 um, Language Science. Um, so, what is this class? Oh, whoops. There we go. What is this class? In kind of a mechanical view, it's a podcast based class. What that means is all of my lectures I've recorded in podcast form. I've done that because this class particularly lends itself well to that format. There's not a ton of pictures that we need to look at. We're talking a lot about what's going on inside the brain. We're talking a lot about working memory. We're talking a lot about finding words, saying things, repairing errors that we've made during our talking. And so it's not very picture heavy. It's not like other classes that you've had with me. Say, for instance, speech science. You need to see that waveform. It would not be a good podcast class. Also, 205, there's a lot of pictures that we have to take a look at there as well. And anatomy, same kind of thing there. You can't really teach an anatomy class without pictures. But this one you can. And I think that it works well for a lot of my previous students because a lot of you are online students. You've got jobs that occur during the typical work day. And so you're trying to put in your class into weekends, mornings, afternoons, evenings, nights sometimes. A lot of you have children. So you can listen to this lecture then while you're at the gym, or you can listen while you're driving to work or something like that. So hopefully it is going to allow you to have more access to the material. You can not have to just like put the video on fast speed so you can like speed through it and then get to the quiz. This way you can actually listen to it, take stuff in, listen to it a second time if you need to. Hopefully. I mean, whatever works best for you. I put the Psycholinguist, which is the name of my podcast, on a service called Castbox. Castbox is free. However, I just got a new phone, and when I downloaded Castbox, when you download it, it looks like you have to pay. Like it's like, hey, Castbox Premium. Just skip that. You don't need to do that. This is what Castbox looks like, if I can show it to you. So it'll look like this. It gives you all these things. You can search for the Psycholinguist. I'm the only one. I can't believe that no one has thought of this name before. It was amazing. Probably someday I'll get hit with a copyright infringement suit, but whatever. It's fine. If you don't want to download an app to your phone, you can also listen online. All you have to do is make an account and then log in. You can listen on your computer. The other thing is I put all of the lectures on Canvas, so you can listen directly on Canvas as well. It's really whatever works best for you. If you're a podcast person, then you can use this app just like you use your typical app. I want to get it on all the podcast platforms, but you have to pay money to do that, and I haven't asked the college to pay for this yet, but maybe I will. We'll see. One thing that I will say is you should always look at the show notes. So I always put in the description a little bit about what the podcast that lecture is going to be about. But I also put in any pictures that you might need to take a look at before. I think that it helps to take a look at the pictures before you listen and then after as well. So you look before, you see that I'm going to be talking about these things, so they're kind of in your memory. So then when I do talk about them, you're like, oh yeah, I remember seeing that. And then afterwards, you can take a look at them and think like, oh, I see what he was talking about. There's not a ton. I mean, I think the most heavy one has like 4 different pictures that you're going to look at. So like right before you get in the car, just take a look at these 4 pictures, or right before you start lifting weights or whatever, take a look at those, and then, do what you need to do. Now, some of you don't enjoy learning auditorially. That's fine. I've gone back the first couple times I did this. Some people were like, I don't really know if this is for me. So I've made PowerPoint slides as well. If you like the traditional way of seeing PowerPoint slides, you can pull up these PowerPoint slides while you listen to the podcast, and then you get all that text information as well. Now, if you do like the podcasts, you should also look at the PowerPoint slides right before you take your quizzes, use them to study for your exams. So, all the information's there. You don't have to like listen to 2 hours worth of or 3 hours worth of podcasts just to study. So you can just kind of blow through these PowerPoint slides. Okay, so that's the kind of mechanics of the class. But what the heck are we talking about in this class? Well, we're talking about really psycholinguistics. It's called language science, but it's really psycholinguistics. So there's a little bit of linguistics. There's a lot of psychology. In a way, it's really a psychology class. And that's why this one is open to a lot of people who aren't in the speech and hearing sciences major. A lot of you might be neuroscience people in one of the neuroscience tracks, either through SHS or the interdisciplinary studies, anything like that. You might be taking this. So think about it like kind of a hybrid psychology, linguistics, speech and hearing science class. We talk about neuroscience kind of in the view of we're not looking in the brain a whole lot. We'll talk about some areas. I'm a person who has done some neuroimaging work. I've got a couple publications where I've used fMRI. I've used EEG, I just haven't published anything with it. So I know the neuroscience and like the neuroanatomy and stuff, but really this is kind of more of a treat the brain as a black box usually. Like something's going to happen in there, and we can determine by the output of the person what has happened. So for instance, we're going to look at a lot of speech errors. If somebody says something like, and you've probably heard this kind of thing before, well, people call them Freudian slips. I don't really subscribe to the belief that Freud knew what he was talking about at all. But it's usually like a transposition of some letters, right? So if you were going to say like fuzzy slippers, this isn't really going to work. But you might accidentally say suzzy flippers, right? And or sudsy flippers instead of fuzzy slippers. And so from that kind of error, we can infer things about the speech process, like how we're actually putting these speech sounds together. Some of them are able to be transposed and others aren't. What types of words do we make more errors on? Well, it tends to be content words that we make a lot more errors on. We're going to talk about this later, but it tends to be content words. It seems like, that seems a little counterintuitive, right? Like I'm thinking about fuzzy slippers. I'm thinking about my grandma wears fuzzy slippers and she goes to the store. She's old, so she doesn't keep them only in her house. Like her footwear is basically slippers. And this is what I'm trying to tell somebody. Like she's wearing fuzzy slippers to the bank. Did you see her in there? She's the one that's probably in a nightgown. Something like that. And it's the content words that we make errors on, which again seems counterintuitive because that's what we're focusing on. However, those are the ones that change in our language most often. We put we imagine the concepts, we come up with this kind of scene of what we're talking about. We're imagining our grandma, like, is she in the bank? And these are the things that we kind of like work around. We work the language around this content. What we don't tend to make a lot of mistakes on are things like is, the, a, little words like that, because those are so ingrained into us that they're overlearned basically. We don't even have to think about where those kind of articles and little connecting words, prepositions and stuff like that go. It's really more that they'll connect themselves. Our brain will connect those words to the content words while we're talking. So we tend to make a lot more of our mistakes with the content words. Not always, but usually. And that tells us about language. That tells us what's going on up here without necessarily taking a neuro image of the brain. In fact, one of the shortcomings of neuroscience, which, I love neuroscience, I love imaging, I love neuroimaging. It's great and it's useful sometimes, but it isn't always useful to decide. You can't take a picture of someone's brain with fMRI, with EEG, any of that, and say, oh, this is how they made that mistake in that speech. This is how they made that speech error. You can't see it. We don't have that resolution yet. We're not even sure necessarily where to look. I mean, we can come up with an area of about this size, but in terms of brain real estate, that's huge. That's like a city block. So if you're looking for someone, for a single person, and you can narrow it down to a city block, like in New York, where you've got like a high rise, it's still going to take a lot of work to find that person. Now, if you're looking for, say, a district, like a whole district is an industrial district, or there's a place where there's a shopping mall or something like that, this is more on the size of things in the brain that we can like look at. So somebody can give you a city block and they can say like, yeah, this is like the shopping mall. So we can see things like that. But individual little things like a speech error, we can't really see with neuroimaging. And so that's why we use this view of treating the brain like we know there's something going on in there. It's not even going to do any good to look at it. So let's just look at what the output should be, what the error is, and then try to make sense of what's going on there. It's still science. We can still do really sophisticated science with it. We're just not using those imaging techniques. And that's a lot of what we're going to be talking about in this class, that kind of thing. It's really fun, I think. It's one of my favorite classes to teach, this and speech science. Kind of for the same reason. I mean, there's some really hard, good science that can go on in both of these. If you've taken 205 with me, you know that I love the research methods lecture, which no one else does, right? I mean, like you guys sit through it and you're like, how can he go on this long about research methods? But the reason why is because I love research. I love hard data. I love getting actual answers. And the kind of like linguistics research, working memory research that we talk about in this class is good, solid data that really can tell us what's going on in the brain. We're looking at speech science. We can measure acoustic signals. We can do things with them. We can say like, oh, this person has a higher third formant than the other. So we get really hard, good data. So we're talking a lot about a lot of great science in both of these classes. Not that the other classes that I teach don't have great science. I mean, anatomy, it's hard not to have good science there because we can actually like dissect a person and look at it. We just don't have to be as clever about the kind of research that we do. Okay, let me tell you a little bit about me in case you have not had a class with me before. I was born in Mesa. This is an online class, so of course, like some of you have no idea that there's even a city in Arizona called Mesa. Whatever. I graduated from Hamilton, which is in Chandler. Then I went to ASU. I got my BS, Bachelor of Science. Then I got my master's and my PhD. My PhD is in cognitive psychology or cognitive science. You can call it either one of those. I try not to have the word psychology in there because a lot of people don't know all of the different facets that there are to psychology. You say psychology, people think therapist. That is not all that psychology is. Neuroscience is very close to cognitive psychology. In fact, in the cognitive program, we have a lot of neuroscientists. You can also have neuroscientists in biology. They do basically the same thing. We have neuroscientists here in speech and hearing science as well. And they all do the same kind of research. They just have jobs in different places. So they're all kind of converging on the same space. So even though it's psychology, it is not that Freud psychotherapy kind of psychology, not by any stretch of the imagination. What I did there was I specialized in sensation and perception. So like things that you see, smell, taste, touch, all that kind of stuff, and then how you perceive it. And specifically, I focused on auditory and visual perception, which is how I ended up at the speech and hearing, as one of the speech and hearing faculty at the College of Health Solutions. I'm also a runner. Here's some friends and I at a mud run, which of course we can't do those right now, so that's kind of a bummer. This is like 2 or 3 years ago. Boo. Okay, let's talk quickly about some of my research, and then we'll talk a little bit more about the class. Also, let me plug this in really quickly. This is definitely a part that I should cut out, but will I? I don't know. There we go. I probably won't cut it out. You'll just have to put up with it. Okay, so I've done some work with swear words. This is like a totally linguistics thing. It's really fun too. Basically what we did was we looked at different phonemes. If you've had 205, you know what a phoneme is. It's the smallest intelligible unit of speech. It's a speech sound, basically. So things like e, u, b, v. These are all phonemes, right? So what I looked at here was vowel phonemes used in swear words and regular words. And what I found was the usage of these vowels these vowel phonemes are not equal. It's not consistent between swear words and non-swear words. What you see is there are some vowel phonemes that can be used much more often in swear words. Those are the dark bars in this graph that you're looking at here. And then there's some vowel sounds that are used much more often in regular words and aren't present in swear words at all. So things like e and oo aren't present in swear words. In fact, oo, the closest I can come up with is poop. That's not even really a swear word. E, there's only one word that I could find that uses that vowel phoneme at all. And it's not, it's kind of a swear word. And then you go to and and swear words love and and those are used much less often in non-swear words. You do have to make a distinction between schwa and so they basically have the same acoustic signature, but one is unstressed and one is stressed. If you conflate the two because they have the same acoustic signature, then you don't end up finding a difference between swear words and non-swear words. There are a lot of schwa sounds. There's a lot of unstressed in English. Information. There's that's a schwa. But when you're looking at stressed not just schwa, then you start to see a difference. There's a lot more schwas in regular words. This makes sense. Regular words tend to be a little bit longer than swear words, so that makes some sense. But there are a lot more stressed uhs in swear words than there are in non-swear words. I'm sure you can think of at least 3 right now. some pretty choice ones too, right? And then as well. There's a lot of in swear words. And this looks like what we have is a difference. Like we know this. This is something that we know about our language is that E and U, these are things that are a little bit softer, a little bit more consonant. And we use this for talking to like puppies and babies and things like that. In fact, puppy, baby. Um, and then when we're using swear words, we kind of use things that are a little bit more dissonant, like and ah. So those are getting further away from these kind of nice sounds that we use for happy things and soft things and stuff like that. So it's a little like rule that we've learned and put that into our language. Okay, so another thing that I've done is I've looked at this talking drum, which is called a dundun. It's from Nigeria. This drum conveys speech information. If you know how to play it, you can make it say things. And then other people who know how to play it or just listen, they know the code, they know the language of the drum, they can hear what's being said on the drum. Or they can hear it, they can understand what's being said on the drum. You could hear it even if you couldn't understand it. So what we want to know is there are a lot of things to the human voice, right? There's a lot of stuff going on. There's a lot of different dimensions of acoustic differences that we can make with the human voice. We can change our pitch, we can change our timbre, we can change our loudness, we can change the formants, we can so we're changing the ahs and the e's and the oohs and stuff like that, and we can do all sorts of different kinds of consonants. How do you take this multi-dimensional thing and smush it down into a drum that really only changes pitch and intensity? How do you do that? Well, that's the work that I'm looking at, is if we take all of these things that we know about spoken language and we map them onto the drum, which one of those significantly predict the changes in the drum? And so then we can say that this change in the drum maps onto these two different aspects of speech. And then lastly, this picture of me up here is from an article in Psychology Today, online, not the actual printed one, from some work that I'm doing with tetrachromacy. Tetrachromacy just means 4 cones or 4 colors. This is looking at people who have 4 color cones in their eye. Most of us only have 3. And what I'm doing is trying to find what types of colors people who have 4 cones see. When those colors are more apparent, what kind of conditions, like atmospheric conditions, the sun is in a different place, so it can, create different light for these people. So we're basically just trying to figure out more about this 4th cone, so that the rest of us can understand what it might look like. If you think about people that are colorblind, it's basically like we're all colorblind compared to these people with 4 cones. We have no idea what this extra dimension of color could even be. So we're just trying to learn a little bit more about it. Okay, so let's talk about how the class is going to be set up. There's 4 exams. There are 8 quizzes. This actually, I think is wrong. I think there's 7 quizzes. Sorry about that. And there's various homeworks. Like you'll have at least 1 homework a week. They're not long though, so don't get worried. For your exams, they're all about 33 questions long. You will have 2 hours to complete this exam. You will have to use the Respondus lockdown browser and the Respondus monitor. So somebody's going to be watching while you take this, and I get flagged if somebody comes in the room, if you're talking to something, if you're looking at a phone. They also make you do a room check just to make sure you don't have cheating materials out. So don't cheat. And you shouldn't need to, because your lowest exam is dropped. You're going to take 3 exams that are at the end of each, like, kind of third of the class. So you'll take 1, 2, 3, and then there's a final. The final is cumulative. But if you like the scores that you've gotten on your first 3 exams, you don't have to take the last one because it would go in as a 0 and then it would be dropped as the lowest grade. So you can just have these. So if you, like, let's say you get a 90, 89, 99, and you're like, that's great. I've got a great grade with all the other stuff. I don't even need to take this one. Fine. Be done early with the class, and you don't have to take the last one. It'll go in as a 0, but then it gets dropped. So you're safe. Now, another thing you could do is, let's say you did okay, and you just want to see how you do. You don't want to put in a ton of time to study for the final. You just want to come in, you want to take it, you want to see how it goes. Cool. If it's the lowest one, it gets dropped. If it's not the lowest one, we drop the lowest one. You can also use this as a security blanket for if you forget to take an exam or you don't have time, something happens, and you're not able to take one of the exams. It's cool. Your lowest one gets dropped. So you have to miss one exam, it'll go in as a 0, but just take the other 3 and do as good as you can, and that last one gets dropped. So you're not really penalized for one really low exam. There are 7 quizzes. Like I said, you get 2 attempts for these. And what I think you should do, you don't have to use the Respondus monitor or the lockdown browser for these quizzes. What I think you should do is I think you should go through the first time and don't use your notes. See what you know. Use it to quiz yourself to see how you're going to do on the exams, because the same types of questions that you see in the quizzes show up in the exam. So pay attention to the quizzes, see how you do, and then the second time, when you have your grade for the first one, you know the questions that you missed, pull out your notes that you've taken. Open up the PowerPoints, get out your book, and answer the questions. Make sure you get 100% on those. You want to get 100% your second time. And then take note of what you didn't know, and that way you can do really well on the exam. For the homework, it's mostly going to be stuff like, I'm going to have one where you have to diagram a couple sentences. It's not very hard. It is kind of hard for some people. And if you don't do well on the first try, I've got a second set of sentences. You can redo it and see how you do. So you can redo that one a couple times to make sure you get the concept and the points. There's some hands-on research that you're going to be doing, and then there's also some competitions with your family, like a slang competition, like who knows drip, like you're going to play with your grandma, and you're going to have slang that spans from the 20s to the 20s. It's like 100 years worth of slang, and you're going to see who does better with this slang. It doesn't have to be a grandma, it could be anybody, but that's the kind of competition that you're looking forward to. Okay, and that's the kind of homework that you're looking forward to too, that kind of stuff. It's nothing huge. Should just be fun and easy points. There might be extra credit, some sort of study that you can participate in. If there's not, I'll have at least one non-research extra credit opportunity for you. Studies are starting up again, but they're kind of trickling in. So there may be some research, there may not be some research. Mine's all done online, even before the pandemic. I love utilizing internet-based studies. But I am not sure. I think I might be at the place where I need to start writing up some studies instead of collecting data. But we'll see. We'll see. Okay, here's a thing that I always like to tell people. You should talk to DRC, which stands for Disability Resource Center, or SAILS. I don't know what the acronym of that is. If you think that there's anything, any sort of accommodation that you might need. Some of you might already have this, and that's good. But some of you, if there is some sort of difficulty that you have with any of your classes, not just this one, um, you maybe should talk to the DRC. So some people have dyslexia and they know they have dyslexia. They were identified in grade school, and this is something they know about themselves. But there are always one or two students that I have every semester who have something that I've called their attention to: dyslexia, test anxiety, auditory processing disorder, misophonia, any of this kind of stuff. And they'll talk to the DRC and they might end up getting accommodations. So if you have dyslexia, there's different kinds of fonts that you can have installed into your computer that will make it easier for you to read. And you might be 20, 30, 40, 50, maybe you're 65, and you're just now realizing maybe you have dyslexia. Like you've gone back to school now, you want to do something different, and you're thinking like, it's always been hard for me to not to learn, but to read. Well, maybe it's dyslexia, and you can get accommodations from DRC and sales for that. There's a lot of things. So anything that seems like you struggle with that doesn't really make sense. I mean, we all kind of know what our cognitive abilities are. Are you a smart person, but there's one area that's really a struggle? You might need an accommodation for that area in that case. And it never hurts to see, right? The only person that's going to know if you don't qualify is you and the person that you talk to at DRC. Nobody else is going to know. So you don't have to be embarrassed about thinking that you might have a thing and not getting accommodations for it. And if you do qualify, you're only going to add one extra person to that mix, which is me and your other instructors as well. So if you do qualify for accommodations, we're notified that you need these XYZ accommodations. We're not told why. So your medical history is still your own. We just know that you might need extra time on an assignment, flexible deadlines, stuff like that. So, if this rings a bell, maybe this is something you want to look into. And then lastly, this is a very diversity positive class. I don't look like it, but I do come from a diverse background. I'm Hispanic, even though, again, I don't look like it. But I'm also Swedish. So I think it's kind of like you have this Hispanic part, you have the Swedish part. They just turn you into like a regular white person. Anyway, like looks wise. And then in my larger, like not just me genetically, but larger family, extended family, it's even more diverse. There's a lot of diversity here. So it's important to me that everybody feels welcome in the class. I'm also on the SHS Jedi Council for both curriculum development and hiring practices. This is me right there. Just kidding. They call it the SHS Jedi Council because Jedi stands for Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. And then I think they realize that's a Jedi, and they're like, we should call it Council. I make a lot of Star Wars jokes in there, and I don't think a lot of people get them. But, I mean, the number of times I've said, I am the Senate, never lands. Anyway, so I definitely believe in equitable treatment for everyone. This is not necessarily the same as equal, right? So if there is this kind of goes to the DRC thing. If there's an accommodation that somebody needs to be able to like have equal footing with everybody else, like we should have that. So I think the DRC is usually the best way to get that, but certainly feel free to email me or your TAs if there's something else that you recognize. I also want to push that in the discussion board posts that we have. I've never had an issue. No one's ever... Yeah, no. It's always really welcoming in the class. So it's not like I have to say this because there's ever been an issue or anything. What we talk about in the few discussion board posts that we have is really fun stuff anyway. We look at speeches from people who have a lot of speech errors. We talk about the competitions with your family or friends. So it's not like there's microaggressions everywhere in there. But it's important to know that, you know, you shouldn't do that. That it should be a, you know, good, safe place to be a diverse person. Um, However, there's not a whole lot of diverse topics in this class. Uh, we talk about, you know, like how things are processed in the brain. Well, guess what? It's really processed the same way across the board. I mean, you know, males, females, not really a difference. Any ethnicity you can think of, there's not really a difference. Everybody is a human, and language is processed really kind of the same way. And in fact, when we talk about some animals that have, there's a debate: do they have language or do they just have some form of communication? But if you are one of the ones who believes that animals have language, then it kind of functions the same way there too. So if we're talking about animals and humans having very similar communication processes, uh, you're not going to see a lot of difference within humans. And this is a cool thing, I think, is that it doesn't matter who you are or what kind of background you have. Like, the language is still working the same way. The brain is still taking in information and processing it and putting out things in really the same way. Brains are pretty much the same unless you've got some sort of brain damage, like an aphasia. So anyway, we don't talk a lot about different diverse topics. That doesn't mean that I don't think that it's important. It just means that there are not a lot of diverse topics in this class. It's kind of the nature of the thing. I will have a podcast that's kind of like an extra one towards the end that does talk about some diversity things. I just haven't worked it into the class yet, where there are quiz questions and exam questions about it. So this is really just going to be a thing like, you're done with the class, here's 2 or 3 extra lectures that I have that if you really liked the class, you can listen to whenever you want, like if you're into podcasts or something like that. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And I'm also trying to add a little bit more about bilingualism into the class, but I don't know a lot about bilingualism. So I'm going to have to read a lot of research and kind of condense it down for you guys. So again, what is in the class already, which is a little bit, I've already put that into the exams and quizzes. I may talk more about bilingual challenges and how sometimes it can help the brain develop more quickly. Some people think that it can lead to a boost in working memory capacity. We'll talk about that. That's not something like a long lecture just about bilingual education and stuff like that. I haven't worked into the class, so that'll be just another bonus kind of thing. But it'll be there if you're interested in it. Okay, then that's pretty much it, because I think if you've taken another class with me, you know my whole thing about we're all healthcare providers, healthcare specialists, and scientists, one or the other, or you're about to be. If you don't know that whole spiel, I will link you to a video that's just about that. Okay, well, I think this is possibly one of the most fun classes I teach. I know I told you that I really like this one in speech science. I understand that people do not think speech science is as fun as this class, and that's fine. I do. I don't think everybody else does. That's cool. But I do think people really like this class. It sounds like it, you know, when I ask people like, what did you think about the podcast thing? What do you think about the homeworks and stuff like that? People like it. So I hope that you like it too. It should be pretty fun, and you should come away with much deeper understanding of psycholinguistic principles than you came in with. We're going to start the lectures off with one of the most contentious debates in all of linguistics, so that should be pretty fun. And you, well, just listen to the podcast and you'll see. Okay, well, I'll talk to you soon.